You may be wondering why this video is about the why of Square Snoot as opposed to the what. And depending on when in the evolution of this comic strip you are watching this video, it may be a very valid question. But as the first ever for this channel, this video is the entry point I've consciously chosen to introduce the project for a couple of reasons. Number one, a comic strip is not a complicated matter. The visual medium itself is such that it presents itself very obviously what it is, and the jokes, while not always funny, are fairly obvious. And then second, you may be coming to this video years later and well know the what of the strip. Moreover, the strip will unfold however it does, but it will do so as a consequence of the why. So the intent behind the strip will generally dictate its content, and so for these reasons I think the why is a great starting point. Now, that being said, a short what is essential for those of you who are brand new and who may have stumbled onto this channel not knowing what the hell it is. So, simply stated, Square Snoot is a comic strip about two cats, Bardo and Banut, who live with their two human companions named Dude and Ginger, who basically hang out with a whole host of undomesticated animals who live in their neighborhood. The strip itself is modeled after and greatly influenced by a select group of popular late 80s and I guess early 90s newspaper comic strips, of which you will most likely be very familiar. Think Calvin and Hobbes, Garfield, and Foxtrot. Readers may also see shades of Pogo, Bloom County, and, on occasion, maybe The Far Side, although these influences will certainly be less. Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield are the big influences present, and I make no bones about it. Obviously, I want to create an original strip, but if something is awesome and great, I will borrow from whatever I reasonably can. And the reason for this is that no work occurs in isolation, and I certainly do not have that expectation for Square Snoot, really, ever. Which brings me to the first reason of the why of Square Snoot, and that is nostalgia. Now, nostalgia is a loaded term. I would say that we all experience it, especially as we get older. And while I think it's generally an appreciated emotion, of course there are reasons to discount it or at least be skeptical of it. It's a longing for the past that can trigger depression, or it can prevent you from going forward, or even just enjoying the current events in your life. But I won't belabor the point. For the purposes of the strip, I think we can keep it on fairly even terms. Here I'm using nostalgia as a jumping off point for appreciating the humble comic strip, 3 or 4 panels, or in this case what I've eventually decided on, the Sunday format, which are really simple in form and elegant in execution. So the vast majority of you likely have fond memories of reading Calvin and Hobbes as children, and if you've continued to check into the strip over the years, you will now appreciate how certain aspects of the strip grew with you. Those more adult aspects of Calvin and Hobbes will be the subject of a forthcoming video, likely several because there's really so much to say about that strip. But suffice it to say, for the purposes of nostalgia and this video, I want to create a similar experience with Square Snoot. Now, I realize that that's an ambitious project, but I think it's achievable with a little bit of persistence, progression, and certainly heart. Such an effort would recognize that although we are adults with responsibilities and we do not wish we were children again with all the problems that entails, we can at least partition off a portion of our mind to enjoy these so-called childish things. Because, let's face it, a comic strip is juvenile, but it can also be meaningful. And it's at the intersection of those two qualities that I want Square Snoot to really proudly reside. Comics are a simple form, and perhaps a little stale in our current society that seems hell-bent on spectacle, but it's that very limitation that so starkly contrasts innocent with sharp wit that is really to its credit. And indeed, sometimes these comics are hilariously funny, and it's enough for the fact that sometimes we just like a good laugh. Ultimately, if we dare submit comics to any analysis at all, we need not overthink it. If people enjoy Square Snoot and the strip reminds them of a simpler time, well then hey, it's worth it. The second reason of the why behind Square Snoot is the simple act of creation. Creating something. Because the art of comics is so simple, it's a little more forgiving in terms of quality, and really, at the risk of being defensive, if there's one thing I can recognize about the currently quality of the strip, at least at the time of this video, it's that it's not really all that well done, but I can at least envision a better future. So, and with practice, I'm hoping that my skills will improve. And by that, I'm referring to the art, the writing, the ideas, the timing of the gags, the meaning. And really, by making the strip public and implicitly sourcing reaction and criticism through both this channel and the other social media platforms I'm planning to promote it on, I will get better and improve my craft eventually. But aside from that, it's also the recognition that the art doesn't need to be great. If you look at some of the brushwork on Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes or Schultz's Peanuts, for example, you'll see that it's in some cases not that great. I mean, really look close. You might be surprised at how loose the inking really is, for example. But yet, despite that, we could say that both of those strips are absolutely perfect. Now, I want to reiterate this point a little bit more. Visual mediums are perhaps some of the most critically evaluated when compared to others. If people, for example, watch a movie or a TV show and they don't like the CGI, they can usually articulate a number of detailed reasons why. But if you take those same people and have them evaluate some prose from any author, Hemingway, Melville, Pynchon, they may be at a loss to offer a meaningful comparison. So, again, I'll state the point. Comics seem extra forgiving. We do not expect precision art from our comics, and indeed, once the characters come to life on the page, we don't actually care. So, while I certainly look forward to improving my craft, the primary focus of Square Snoot will always be bringing Bardo and Banute to life. The third why behind Square Snoot relates to what is at my age really a bitter saw that will probably rear its ugly head time and time again in future videos on this channel, and that is the attempt to establish a livelihood. Or really, in more crass terms, making money. Because, let's be realistic, the likelihood of me someday making money off this strip is slim to none. It may be that if I commit to it over the long term that, I don't know, in 10 to 15 years when I have a sizable audience, there will be a means to monetize certain aspects of the strip, but that is really so far away as to not be a concern to me in this present time. So ultimately my goal here is a little more general. I want to abuse the definition of livelihood a little bit. Basically, establishing a livelihood implies making money, but I want to say that that's not required, at least for my conception of it here. Strips like Calvin and Hobbes or Foxtrot or The Far Side were not great because their artists made a lot of money. They had to be great on their own. It's true that the money afforded them the freedom to create and improve their craft, but that is basically a relationship of scale and not one of necessity. An amateur can easily find the time to make a professional high-quality strip if they commit to the process, if they apply themselves. You really only need to look at the myriad of webcomics out there which feature really amazing art that's as good or better than what you would see in the newspapers. And it's that high quality, that presentation that to me defines a livelihood. So someday I would love to see an entire row of Square Snoot books on my shelf, to be able to look at them and know that I made that. And whether or not I made any money, I would say that just bringing a professional attitude to the craft would be enough for me to say, hey, I had a livelihood. The last why of Square Snoot is that it presents a medium for me to publicly work through the ideas and issues that are constantly rattling around in my brain. Now, my wife does an excellent job of putting up with me, but I maintain that it's wholly unbecoming of me to subject her to that. So, I mean, if I can subject you, the audience, my potential readership to that, well, hey, the more the better. So, it's true that I must be careful here when it comes to working through ideas and issues. A comic strip and a YouTube channel is an excellent medium for communicating, teaching, passing along shared ideas, but self-therapy disguised as art often results in bad art. If you are interested in comics, you want the strip to stand on its own. You don't want it to be some insane mouthpiece for an individual who has some axe to grind. And I mean, we all have those. So I'm fully aware that it would be a big problem if Square Snoot was merely a vehicle for that, but I'm confident it won't be, at least not entirely. It's very important to remember that Watterson, for example, and you will find that my respect for Watterson and Calvin and Hobbes means that I will constantly be referencing him and it. You'll find that Watterson infused a lot of social, political, and philosophical commentary into his strip, and Really, admittedly, some of it is a little heavy-handed, but I'm certain on the balance, the strip is stronger for it. Like if I think about a Calvin and Hobbes where the characters don't criticize the attitudes towards, I don't know, high versus low art or ecological destruction or philosophical virtue, whatever it is that he was riffing on at the time, I would think that that would be a far poorer Calvin and Hobbes than what we've been left to cherish. So that's a big lesson that I want to take away for Square Snoot. Now, one thing that I have well learned by now and have made peace with at my age is that I seem to have an innate need to communicate ideas externally. I will, of course, consume and collect and collate ideas internally, but at some point I will reach a level of understanding that I just need to blast it outward at someone. This has shown up in the past as blog posts, essays, fights on social media, but even also slightly improper and unprofessional conversations at work. I'm definitely the type of person where if you sit me down with a friend and a cup of coffee, before long I'm going to be pressing them about one view or another that they have on spirituality or philosophy or politics. This is not to make a pain of myself. It's just the way I am. Um, on this point, I will throw up my hands and plead my absolute helplessness on my inability to change. And let's be clear here, it's not that I believe I'm a genius or that I have everything figured out. As you watch more and more videos on this channel, you will come to understand that I have strong views about many things, but also I'm often at sea when it comes to a lot of things. So the core point here, though, is that I want to connect with people on a level that is, well, at least deeper than a recounting of our reactions to the weather or what each of us did on the weekend. There is a place for that, and there is also a place for meaningful conversation. It's an and, it's not a but. So the critical factor here is understanding what is appropriate for which context. And I think a YouTube channel offers the perfect platform for at least this sort of thing. So indeed, if this channel ever gains any traction at all, it will be with a certain type of person who can relate to what I'm saying. It certainly won't be for everyone. And really, the same applies equally to Square Snoot, the comic strip itself. The medium of the comic strip, innocent, simple, zany, affords a unique opportunity to both communicate big ideas in a loose way and as well push the envelope in ways that maybe more formal or professional forums don't allow for. And it's not that certain ideas in the strip hit you over the head with a sledgehammer, although, certainly that can happen. It's that I want to chase where they emerge organically, and really the ideas are only identifiable in retrospect. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Over the past year, I've been developing the art and characters through a series of prototype strips, basically exploring who they are, what they do, and more importantly for myself, how to draw them. My plan was to get 60 of them out before I started this channel, and I think I got to 54, maybe 53, 54, doesn't matter. What's important here is that in one strip, Bardo and Banute escape the house to get outside, right? And, if you've had cats, you know that they like to do this. And basically, Bardo goes through this convoluted plan of escaping the house, and when he finally gets out there, he realizes that he doesn't actually enjoy being outside. Banute, of course, in his naive way, he's sitting there eating grass, throwing up, having a great old time. But Bardo really comes to realize that it's not once he has gained the freedom, he doesn't value it. And it was only in retrospect that I realized that it's basically a commentary on Sartrean radical freedom, right? Bardo's basically acting in bad faith. Now he has the freedom to do whatever he wants, and he can't do anything. He's just sitting there against a tree, listless, not realizing that his whole reason for being is the fight of escaping, right? So, and I want to be clear here, this conclusion is never stated explicitly in the strip, nor is there any mention of Sartre or radical freedom or even existentialism. What it is that it's something I've studied, something I've found personally important, that I'm now communicating. It's emerging and arising from within me, part of my subconscious. It's clearly an issue I'm dealing with, And so, yeah, it's never laid out explicitly, but I'm telling you, it's in there. It was in Calvin and Hobbes, and it's going to be in Square Snoot. And the promise of being able to communicate such personally important ideas to an audience is perhaps the strongest why I can think of. Except, of course, being able to make my wife and son laugh. I mean, that conquers all, really. So, there you have it, the so-called why of Square Snoot. Thanks for watching. I realize that you could have literally done anything else over the last however long this video is, but here you are having chosen to spend your time with me. You can't imagine how thankful I am for that choice, so thank you, and I hope to see you around. Take care.